What's something people claim they have a right to, but they actually don't? Actually, the right to film people in private buildings that are open to the public really depends on your location. If it's legal depends on if there's a reasonable expectation of privacy, and if your state has one-party or two-party consent laws. But that doesn't mean the private business can't lock you out for filming when they don't want you to. The most common misconception that I find is that people confuse positive and negative rights far too often. That is to say, the rights that the government must not interfere with rather than the rights that they must actively put in place measures to bring about. The right to vote is a positive right. It imposes on the government a mandate to make voting straightforward for the citizenry. The right to life is a negative right. The government is restrained from killing by it in theory, but they are not obliged to go to the ends of the earth to prevent you from dying. The right to drive. No privilege. The right to go into punch mode if people say mean words to you. Nay, being called a jerk or having someone insult your mom throwing your hands at them. That's assault. The right to be on public property like malls. Some think a mall is public because it's open to the public. Nope. It's an implied invitation which can be revoked at any time by the owner of the property, or more commonly the agent of the owner, i.e. a security guard. All too often people do not understand that their right to free speech is not absolute. Free speech rights are often limited in certain contexts, such as in private workplaces, schools, or other private settings where owners or authorities can set rules and restrictions. Moreover, they forget that when free speech has consequences, for example, other private citizens start to boycott their business, shun them in public, etc., those reactions are also an expression of free speech. Free speech simply means that the government will not persecute you if you talk shit about the government. Allboy tried to argue that he wouldn't get shot at just for passing through someone's property, and had the right to safe passage since he wasn't doing anything malicious. We're in Texas. You don't have free speech outside of government prosecution. I really have a really difficult time understanding why Americans don't get this concept. Absolutely, you're right. A common misconception is that people believe they have a right to free speech in any context, but actually, freedom of speech protects you from government censorship, not from consequences imposed by private entities. For instance, a private business can set rules about what can and can't be said on their premises or on their platforms. Another example is the notion that people have a right to use someone else's intellectual property like music or images without permission for personal projects. In reality, copyright laws strictly protect these works, and using them without permission is a violation, not a right. Anytime someone says I have a right to Zeiss, but Zeiss is something that has to be provided by another person. Rights are inherent to an individual. If something has to be provided for by another person, that is not a right. A lot of toxic parents out there claim they have a right to raise their children as they see fit. A lady once told me she had the right to drive 100 of the time in the passing lane because she paid taxes. Everything. You don't have a right to anything. We don't have positive rights. We have negative rights. You have your rights because you are alive and breathing. The Constitution does not give you those rights. They are self-evident. The Constitution prevents the government from infringing upon those rights. We do not receive any rights from the government or the Constitution. They merely exist to defend those rights we do have with or without the existence of the Constitution or government. Free speech. It does not mean people have a right to say anything, anywhere, at any time, or, in modern times, post anything anywhere, at any time. It means that the U.S. government, federal or state, cannot prevent their speech, except under very specific exceptions, none of which are shouting fire in a crowded theater. The right to drive. No, it's a privilege. I think many people think they hold the right to the characters and items in online games. Nope, the game developer holds the right to simply delete your account, characters, items, in-game currencies whenever they like for whatever reason they like. A right to free speech. When talking about having a comment deleted on a place like Facebook or Reddit. No, you have the right to the government not censoring you. You are not entitled to a platform to spew your bullshit. Bringing your pet into a store that doesn't allow pets. Businesses can set their own rules about what customers can bring in. People often confuse rights with privileges. Just because you have a right doesn't mean you won't have consequences. Sadly, healthcare. Privacy in public.